Hi, this is Mike. Making my video to add to my collection. Today is 5/1/2025 and it's 4:42 p.m. Uh, so anyway, yeah, I'm talking about more or less reality. In today's day and age, we've crossed the threshold, where computer science and stuff like that is pretty much explained, the phenomenon of the human mind in many ways. Um, you know, uh, minus a couple of things. For the most part, though, like the inside of your mind, there's a universe inside of you, and it stands to reason that the universe inside of you is connected to everybody in the world and every creature in the world. But then again, uh, when you observe something, it becomes real. It's not so much that you discover it; it's that it always the potentiality of it is always there. And then, of course, when you discover it, or you create it as you discover it, and it's not so much that it exists outside of you. It's like a mirror. If you see a reflection in the mirror, it's behind the mirror. It's trapped inside the mirror. There's a phenomenon where you know a person is looking in the mirror or something like that, and they're playing rock paper scissors, and of course that person has one set of actions, and then of course on a reflection that the ulterior self does another set altogether, and that's been recorded and it's been witnessed. And with that being said, it shows that there's dimensions on the inside of that mirror, and I've seen that before where there was a separate dimension inside of a mirror, and I've talked to people on the inside of a mirror. Not to mention a whole slew of other things that I've seen. So I pretty much, broke into, the heavens domain. I didn't break in, but I entered in, and you have to enter in when you're pure of heart. You have to. There's only one way to get in, and you have to be a certain mindset. You have to have it to where your heart is a certain way, the pure in heart. So anyway, there's that, and then of course you have to have major sacrifices and determination. Of course, believe all things are possible. There's infinite possibilities in every action, and you have to have gratitude, and you know there's other things. You have to have a high amount of energy, and you have to be alert, and you have to have patience. You have to be single in point, single in purpose. You can't be double-minded. You can't be doubtful, and of course, steadfast. Patience. So there's a whole bunch of things that are involved in that. Probably the 12 universal laws. But your mind itself is, everything's inside of you. Uh, that's the easiest way I can say it. I mean, yeah, okay. Like this computer was created that I'm talking in, and somebody else built it. Some other group of people. But the thing is, I acquired it. And when I go to sleep at night and I shut my eyes, the computer doesn't exist. But when I wake up and look at it, it materializes and exists. So, without sentient beings, present, reality doesn't exist. Uh, it's just a bunch of potentialities. It's more or less like the quantum field. And of course, as you observe it, then it becomes real. So, the moon isn't there until you observe it. It's straight up truth. And of course, but in order to be happy, more or less content, you have to shed off all that dead weight, and you have to shake off your old self. And more or less, you have to slowly go through a process of letting go of things. It might be your knowledge, it might be your money, it might be your job title, your ego. anything associated with the ego and your relationships, and then your family, your friends, uh, and eventually it even gets to the point where you lose your clothes and you get grounded. So you go through all that process, and then you slowly go through stages of letting go, and it's not immediate. A lot of these things take, you go through a process, and it might take several weeks to a month or whatever, or even years. But you do it, and then eventually you get to the point where you collapse away function, and you witness a miracle. The windows of heaven, your eyes open, and they pour down a blessing so big you can't contain it. Your cup overfloweth. And basically what happens is you might have epiphanies and stuff like that. That stuff you see or hear, and of course maybe synchronistic events. But what happens with all these things is they answer questions that you have in your mind, and those questions get answered, and you no longer are the same person. You change. You put on a new garment, and you basically become a new person altogether, and you don't see things the same way as you used to. And you can't go back to go and collect $200. You can't, once the genie gets let out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. There's no going back to the way things were, because you've changed and you see things differently. And a lot of times, you choose a solitary life because, that opens the door for you to receive things. And if you have a wife or a girlfriend or whatever, or a family, and friends, you're doing all these things and you're dividing your loyalties between them, and you're not dedicating enough time to receiving or doing the things that you want to do. And sometimes, when you do that, you uh, spread yourself thin. And when you spread yourself thin, you're not dedicating enough time towards yourself and towards the goals that you want to truly achieve. So, basically, I've received a lot of stuff in life, and I basically have money and property and stuff like that, and I've had a lot of miracles happen. And I've experienced a lot. I've had a lot of education, a lot of relationships, and it's gotten to the point in life now where I live a simpler life. I don't do the things I used to do. I don't crave the same things I used to crave, and that's because the wave function was collapsed, and I experienced things that pretty much answered everything for me. And I don't have the same burning desire with things anymore. I do, but it's like uh, it's not like things are the same anymore. And of course, when you slowly let go of things and you do that, what happens is you feel empty on the inside sometimes, and sometimes less is more, and nothing is everything. It's like you have when you do let go and you have everything taken away from you. Uh, what happens is you no longer have all those attachments with things like outcomes, or you're attached to certain things, and then what happens is your mind takes over, and the slave takes over, and the ego gets destroyed. You destroy that powerful king, and you stab him with a knife, a sword, and that sword of intellect. You dismantle the king, and then what it is that the king steps down, and then the servant, steps up, basically, or the queen of heaven, basically, and your subconscious mind, when it takes over, and the conscious mind is still there, but that has to do with the outward expression of the world, and your subconscious mind has to do with the dreamscape and the supernatural things. And then when that takes over, what happens is you find out that God's foolishness was greater than man's wisdom, and you know you're able to manifest miracles, and you know material items and stuff like that as well. You have major synchronicities, but then again, you know you have great, huge miracles that take place that blow your mind, and you'll never be the same once you've experienced that. And you don't share the same realities as other people, and the reason being is you don't see things the same way as they do, and they don't see things the same way as you do. You know, like as far as to have perfect communication, you have to have the ARC triangle: affinity, reality. You have to share the same reality. You have to have affinity for that person, and of course, open communication. But when you don't share the same reality with people, you know, I start talking about some of the miracles that have happened, and people just don't click. You know, they don't see it the way I do. And I've talked to thousands, and out of all those people, you know, just a small handful of them are on the same page as me, and that's kind of the way it is. So, you know, if you bring forth what is inside you, that will save you. You know, the slave, or the servant rather, and, you know, basically the Queen of Heaven, you know, she comes forth, and then, you know, you have Sophia, and she's able to give you something that will save you from something. And when you have it to the point where you don't have anything, and you're at your wit's end, and you don't have any kind of uh, collapse of the wave function that can save you, you know, you that will kill you, and if you don't bring it forth. So you know it's pertinent, you know, to have uh, connection with the Queen of Heaven, you know, the Holy Spirit, and she'll save you. But then again, you know, she can convict you as well. But then again, ultimately, she saves you, and without her, you know, without that, your subconscious mind, you know, you'd be fucked. that's when that's when the bridegroom leaves the bridal chamber, or vice versa. The bride, you know, or the bridegroom, you know, basically the bride and the groom leave the bridal chamber. So you know that's like when when they both leave, you know, you're left with a shell of a person. So anyway, there's that, and but you know it's, you know, ultimately we're just playing this game. It's interactive, and we're connected with you know our consciousnesses are all connected, and we're, you know, basically I could put words in people's mouths, or thoughts into people's heads and stuff like that. But we're all, I got my goggles on, I got my headphones on, I got my spacesuit on, you know, interactive video game, and we're playing it. And there's all kinds of scenarios. It's just, you know, I'm playing it right now, and you know, it's really ultimately all it is. Everything is a manifestation of the mind, and everything basically is computer generated. It's just you can't tell because it's so well made and it's so refined. You know, I've had instances where I've seen that, where things materialized, and as they were materializing, you could see they were computer generated, but then they turned into a fully fledged rendition of what we are. I've talked to spirits, had conversations with them. They materialized out of thin air. I've seen objects materialize out of thin air. I've held those things in my hand, and I've also seen it to where, you know, I was in a room like Schrodinger's cat I saw across the hall. It was just outside my peripheral vision, and as soon as it was like that, you know, I could see a gray film that covered the window, but as soon as I turned my head just enough, it would disappear, and the film would disappear, and yeah, I could see it in the room. So anyway, that's it. All it is a manifestation of the human mind. And of course, when you have it to where you let go of everything, you have a sense of peace and euphoria and bliss and expansiveness. That's how to receive and achieve true happiness. Over and out.